Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth, where we're exploring all sorts of business topics. Experts from around the world join me, your host, Diane Helbig, for a conversation where they share their expertise with all of you. Take what you need when you need it. Featured on Inc.com, Forbes, and MSNBC's Your Business, this podcast is recognized as one of the best podcasts for small business, sales, leadership, social media, and more. When it comes to business, Accelerate Your Business Growth has got it covered. And now on with the show. My guest today is Kat Newport. Kat, the founder of Oculus Inc., is a dynamic leader and author. Specializing in leveraging conflict for growth, she empowers individuals and organizations with empathetic leadership grounded in authenticity, resiliency, and momentum, fostering positive change. Thanks so much for being here today, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane.
I'm thrilled to have you here. I love this whole concept of leveraging conflict. So I want to dig into this. So let's talk about conflict. It seems to me that it's unavoidable, that chances are good it's going to happen. But or not a but. I guess what I will say is, so how, in your estimation, does someone navigate that conflict so that there's a positive outcome?
You are absolutely correct. Conflict is unavoidable. You put two people in a room, they're going to have a difference of opinion, hence a conflict. So it will happen, absolutely. Particularly in a workplace, conflict has to be transformed into something bigger than just a disagreement. So how do we go about doing that? And this is kind of what inspired me when I wrote my book. Your conflict has to be SMART. And SMART is an acronym. And the very first step to making sure that your conflict becomes something innovative or becomes something creative is you've got to know what you're arguing about. You have to know what the situation is. There's so many times where two people get into a room and say, we're talking about the same thing and we're having this clash of perspectives on the same thing, but we're really not. So really grounding yourself in the moment, going, okay, what is it that we're actually disagreeing over? What is it that we'd have different perspectives over? And that first step can change the entire dynamic of a conflict.
That's so interesting. So that sounds like there's oftentimes there's something else at play and isn't necessarily the thing that someone says initially is the situation. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Wow. Okay. All right. I get that. So well, I guess my question is, I have several questions. The first one is this. Is it then true that the person, that each of the players doesn't realize there's really more of a core issue here?
So when we're looking at the situation, it's not necessarily that they don't realize what the core issue is. It may be that they have a different perspective on what it should be, or they're projecting or predicting into the situation. So if you, for example, have someone who's particularly risk adverse, they may be looking at this situation going, no, 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 I don't want to do this. There's too much risk involved. Where the other person's looking at it going, wow, we've never done this before. This is so much potential. So you're not really in conflict over what to do next. You're in conflict over how much risk you want to take. So having a productive discussion on what's the risk tolerance of the team, what's the risk tolerance of the organization would be more constructive than sitting here arguing over the idea itself.
I see. Okay. Okay. I get that. Okay. I forgot what my second question was on that one. So I'm going to switch to a different question that I have. It's about really using conflict. How can we use conflict or really embrace conflict so that it leads to really innovative solutions and ideas? How does that happen?
Best way to sort of put this into context and give your brain something to kind of munch on is whenever we're in a workplace situation, people always say, yeah, you got to think outside the box. You love that. You've had that said to you, I can tell.
Only a few times.
Only a few times. Think outside the box. We all have our own perspective. We all have our own experiences. We all have our own education. We all have, what we do well, and that's our box. And if we're only looking at our perspective and what we think is right and what we can do, we're constantly thinking inside our box. When we engage with the perspective of other people, so if we engage with other people who live inside their boxes, both of us are encouraged to at least peek up over the edge of our own box, if not crawl right out of it and make a new box, to think outside of that original box. You need conflict, that scraping together of ideas and different perspectives, to encourage folks to get out of their typical pattern of thinking and their typical pattern of being. So conflict, by dragging folks outside of those boxes, by dragging folks outside of the prediction, oh, this is never going to work because it happened back in 1982, dragging folks, I just aged myself, dragging folks outside of that box creates that innovation, makes space for that creativity that wasn't there before. So instead of conflict being this bad thing that's going to shut down conversations, that's going to make people feel bad, that's going to cause productivity drops, it's going to give you employee attrition, it becomes a playground for, well, what do you think? And what do I think? And how do these work together? And how do they not work together? And how do we move forward? Because if we're looking forward, that's healthy conflict.
Yeah.
We have two different perspectives, but we want to go somewhere with it. And there's the innovation.
I get it. I really like that a lot because it changes our perception of conflict. I'm using air quotes around conflict, right? We instantly think it's a negative thing, but I'm hearing that it doesn't have to be, and it could even be one of the most positive things going on in an organization.
Exactly. If handled in a healthy way.
Right.
And there's the rub.
Well, yes. So talk about that. That feels like this is where emotional intelligence and emotional awareness are really important. But what would you say to a leader who would really like to make sure that all conflict is being handled in a healthy way? What do they do?
When you're looking at conflict, you need to look at it on a broader time scale. Whenever you go into training on conflict, it's about conflict resolution. It's about the flashpoint of the conflict. But conflict is relational. Conflict is about relationships. So there's actually 3 time periods that go along with conflict. There's before the conflict ever happens. What are you doing as a leader to mitigate negative or unhealthy conflict and build relationships within your team and your organization? So before is mitigation. Then there's the flashpoint. What are your skill sets like in handling your conflicts and conflicts between your team? So this is that resolution. So we have mitigation and then resolution. And the one most people forget about, if they remember the first one, the part that most folks forget about is the final phase, is restoration. After the flashpoint, after you have that grinding together of perspectives and you come out the other side, how do you restore equilibrium in your relationship? How do you restore equilibrium in your team so that this becomes a healthy team building moment, as opposed to Sally now hates Jimmy because they had a difference of opinion and Jimmy seems to have won? So you have a longer period to look at when you're leading people through conflict: mitigation, resolution, and restoration.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. I get how people don't think about the restoration part. You figure, okay, we resolved it. Let's all move on. Let's all be happy. And then we're surprised when people aren't happy.
People need guidance. They're looking to you to model the next behavior, particularly from a leadership position. And when I say leadership, it doesn't necessarily mean a titled leader. There are also informal leaders in a group. Mm-hmm. And if you're modeling those healthy behaviors, that I appreciate your perspective, and I'm reacting empathetically, and I see that you're upset, and maybe we're not communicating effectively, and building those bridges so that you can maintain that forward momentum. And then I really appreciate you on the back end of it going, I really appreciate you sticking with that. Thank you so much for explaining that. I never would have thought of that. And showing that appreciation, you're building and restoring the bonds that may have otherwise been broken.
Okay. And what about as the mitigation? What sorts of preventative measures can people adopt so there aren't frequent conflicts happening?
So again, when we're talking conflict, we're talking relationships. So how are you fostering relationships in your teams? So open communication. I know that's so easy to say and so intensely difficult to do. What does communication look like in your team? Are you expecting open communication? Are you expecting honest communication? What does competition look like in your team? Are you ferociously competitive that if Sally does better, she gets her bonus, but if Johnny does not, Johnny doesn't get a bonus? This can affect relationship dynamics with dog eat dog kind of mentality, which is ripe for unhealthy conflict. So look at that competitive side of it. Make sure you're looking at your rock solid people as well as your rock star people. We as leaders sometimes get dazzled by our rock stars, that prime salesperson who hits their target, goes above and beyond every time, but then forgets about, those rock solid people who hit their numbers every month, every time, all the time, that if they were to get disillusioned and leave, the organization would definitely feel it, but they wouldn't be sure why, because they're not the razzle dazzle rock star. So really looking at how those relationships intertwine with one another and how you're balancing them as a leader becomes very important for conflict mitigation.
I think that's huge. And I agree. We focus on the really amazing producers and potentially the not so great, but sort of forget the middle's even there. It's like being a middle child and then wonder why then there's issues.
Absolutely. And I've seen this with my clients, particularly, administration kind of gets forgotten about. The people who run the payroll, the people who make sure the accounts receivable are being collected, these folks who are rock solid that if they disappeared one day because of your magic wand, the organization would implode. But we have the operators and the salespeople who are being praised, and they're oh my gosh, look at this guy, look at this gal, she's done so great. But administration kind of gets passed over, and the bonuses go to the operators and the bonuses go to the salespeople, where the administrators who keep things running on day to day kind of get lost in the shuffle. So it's about that rock star versus rock solid.
Yeah.
Really look at your organization.
Yeah. I love that. And how do you view negotiating and negotiating skills in all of these dynamics?
Negotiating and conflict management, to my mind, are very similar.
Okay.
We have two different perspectives. You want what you want, I want what I want, but we have to move forward together somehow.
Yeah.
And it's that forward momentum and that agenda or mending agenda that we can come to in some sort of agreement on when we're in a negotiation phase that can make all the difference in the world. For example, sitting at a union table, the union wants A, the company can only afford B, but both of us want to do the best for our employees and the organization. Well, we can come to an A minus or a B plus. But we have to be open with what we can do and what we can navigate through to bring us to that point of, yes, this is where we can move forward from. And, all those cliches, it's only a negotiation if nobody's happy. I mean, it really sets up a negative tone for negotiation.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking about relationships here, either from person to person or from person to organization or from organization to organization. I mean, union to the business.
Yeah.
I mean, these are relationships. You have to move forward with that union for the next X number of years for the longevity of this contract. What does that relationship look like if you have a toxic environment at the negotiation table?
Right. And it's believing that we have something in common, that there is a common thread, and that if we can figure out what we agree on, that can change the dynamic, because now we realize, okay, there are things we agree. It sort of brings the temperature down.
Absolutely. Validating the fact that we do have commonality, but also validating the fact that we are still some distance apart on some other things, and saying, no, I can see where you're coming from. I don't happen to agree with you. I can see where you're coming from, and it's completely valid, and I can see what you're trying to do. That can really take some of the sting out of coming into a negotiation and going, well, you're crazy, that's stupid, it's never going to happen. There's ways to deal with this in an emotionally intelligent way that preserves the relationship moving forward.
Yeah, that is for sure. And as we've been talking about all of this, the thing that keeps running through my mind is that a lot of it has to do with how we communicate and the words that we use can really impact how that relationship goes and how that problem solving happens.
Very much so. If you're able to act empathetically in a moment, it can take a lot of that sting out. And when I talk empathy, it's important to remember that empathy is not an emotion. Empathy is a skill. Empathy is being able to identify that another person has another perspective, and that perspective is just as valid as yours. So I don't have to manufacture emotions on my side to somehow engage with someone empathetically. I just have to realize that they're a unique being with a unique perspective, and that we need to find a way forward.
Well, and part of that that I think really needs to be highlighted is you're not, when you do that and when you acknowledge where the other person is coming from, you're not agreeing with them. You're just acknowledging that you've heard them, that their viewpoints are valid, even if they're not the same as yours.
Precisely. Going into a conversation and actively listening to them can make all the difference. That it's not just you picking something up at the beginning of the conversation and then building this rebuttal in your head. It's about listening to it all the way through so you can pick out going, okay, A, D, and F, I really appreciate, and I think I can get on board with. But B and C, can we talk about those a little bit more? Can you expand on those a little bit more? Here's my perspective on B and C. What do you think? And giving space for that conversation, for that difficult and sometimes uncomfortable conversation to happen.
Yeah, that is, I love that. And once again, as we've been talking, I keep thinking about how it requires a degree of curiosity that we have to really be genuinely interested in learning and hearing where the other person's coming from, what's on their mind, what are their goals, why is this an issue? You can come up with a million questions, but really seeking, as Stephen Covey says, to understand first and use that as a platform.
I love the word curiosity.
Me too.
And if we can lead with curiosity instead of leading with judgment, half of our conflict conversations are gone.
Exactly. Right. Not walking into it with those preconceived notions of where the person's coming from and, just really being curious. I know curiosity is my favorite thing. I love this. I'm so glad we're having this conversation because it really shines a different sort of light on conflict and how it can be a source for good, but also why it doesn't have to be dreaded, a negative thing, all of those sorts of things, that it can really be valuable in an organization.
I think it's not only valuable to an organization, I think it is absolutely intrinsic for organizational success. You have to be able to manage conflict in a healthy way, or you're going to be so busy putting out fires that you're going to lose some edge on that innovation. You're going to lose some edge on that client service. You're going to lose edge on product development because you're so busy trying to convince everybody that this change is good, this innovation is good, or you're so busy backfilling positions because conflict has created mental health issues or has created an environment where people don't feel psychologically safe. Conflict is intrinsic to a high-functioning organization. Healthy conflict is intrinsic to a high-functioning organization.
Thank you for clarifying that.
No problem.
It's a very good point. Yeah, it's really, it's going to happen no matter what. So why not deal with it in the best possible way and really harness it for the growth and benefit of the people and the organization.
I love that the people and organization are put together in that sense. Love that.
Well, thanks. I learned it from you. So, will you tell us about the book, Smart Conflict? Did I hear you correctly at the beginning of this conversation that SMART is an acronym?
SMART is an acronym. So that's where it all started. So SMART was a workshop I developed when I was working in corporate. And then when I left that corporate position, I said, let's write a book. So I wrote Smart Conflict, turning disputes into growth opportunities. So very on topic. And SMART, when you look at the workshop, when you look at the compendium, it's know the situation, measure those emotional responses, have an agenda, amending agenda, not the nefarious underhanded kind. Focus on your relationships, and pick the right time and place. So situation, measure, agenda, relationship, and time and place is the acronym.
Oh, that's great. That is great. Wow, Kat, I'm so glad we had this conversation, and I am grateful to you for joining me here. Will you tell the listeners how they can find you and how they can find the book?
Absolutely. The best place to connect with me and find the book is on my website, which is www.smartconflictbook.com. And the book is now available on Amazon. If you want to check it out there, you can look there, or you can hook up with me on LinkedIn.
Nice. Excellent. Wow. So great. I will make sure that information is in the show notes. And as I said, thank you so much for being here. And listeners, thank you. You are who we're doing this for. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, a production of Evergreen Podcasts. Discover more episodes of this podcast and explore others at evergreenpodcast.com. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And if you're looking to get your sales strategy headed in the right direction, pick up a copy of Succeed Without Selling on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Do you love news about LinkedIn, Indeed, Google, and just about every other recruitment tech company out there?
Hell yeah. I'm Chad.
I'm Cheese.
We're the Chad and Cheese Podcast.
All the latest recruiting news and insights are on our show.
Dripping in snark and attitude.
Subscribe today wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We out.